On Monday, Andy Burnham will enter Downing Street in what has turned out to be one of the least dramatic leadership contests in history. But when he walks in, two things are going to tell us more than almost any speech. Firstly, what's the team he's assembled around him? And secondly, how smooth the handover itself looks from the outside.
The Cabinet tells us what kind of Prime Minister he wants to be. And the transition tells us how quickly reality is going to catch up with him.
This week, podcast favourite Shabana Mahmood has emerged as the frontrunner for Chancellor, while other big jobs in Burnham's top team remain unresolved, at least for now.
So today we're asking, who's in the running for the big jobs? What do those choices tell us? And what actually happens in the hours between a Prime Minister leaving Number 10 and another one walking in?
A lot more than you'd think is the answer to that. I'm Helen McNamara, the former Deputy Cabinet Secretary.
And I'm Cleo Watson, a former Special Advisor to Theresa May and Boris Johnson. And this is In the Room.
If we want an economy and a country that works for all people and places, which to me should always be at the very core of Labourism, then it requires a new path to the one we've been on for the last 40 years. The government I lead will confidently lay that path out starting next week.
That was Andy Burnham making his first official speech as Labour leader earlier today, where he promised to be a leader in all places.
As we've said many times, it's not just about one guy, even Andy. There are teams within teams. The one we're all familiar with is the Cabinet, and the biggest job in the Cabinet is the Chancellor, because most simply, they hold the purse strings on all of the Prime Minister's plans.
Now, Shabana Mahmood, as Helen says, one of the faves of the podcast, has emerged as the frontrunner for the role of Chancellor.
Yeah, Shabana was a shadow junior Treasury Minister 10 years ago, and I don't know if this has annoyed you just as much as it's annoyed me, Cleo. I imagine so, that already she's not even started. She's not had day one in the job. And there are some commentators saying that she's just going to be a puppet of Number 10. I suspect those people have not, in fact, met Shabana Mahmood or, in fact, understood the proper dynamic of what it really is like between the Chancellor and the Prime Minister, even at the best of times.
I agree, but also it's misunderstanding of how you think Number 10 works. To say things like the economy is going to be driven through Number 10, there aren't actually that many people in that building. There's a reason the Treasury is a very powerful force, because it employs literally thousands of civil servants, experts in their field, and it's just not a good use of the skills of someone like Shabana Mahmood to not use her properly. I was really surprised to see that, and I also think it just, if you're going to characterise her as a puppet like that, it really doesn't help, actually, that she's a woman and she'll be the first ethnic minority woman to hold that post, and then to have this idea that she's not really in charge anyway is so undermining and damaging. And if I were any of the Labour women MPs, I'd be furious to see it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that people say about Shabana Mahmood when she arrived at the Home Office, which is one of the reasons that we think she's great, is that she didn't spend a few days reading her way in and thinking about things and having 84 meetings and wondering about life. She just got in really clear, this is what I need to do on migration. This is all I'm focusing on. I am doing this. Here we are. Let's go. And is really good at taking decisions, really tough, really clear, listens to people, takes advice, but then gets on with it. And actually, those are all great strengths in a minister.
Yeah, which is exactly, not to pull the receipts on you, but you've said this on the podcast a while ago about the Chancellor is someone that does have to project massive amounts of confidence. And, we talked on Tuesday about how Rachel Reeves is sort of showing her personality a bit more now. And she made this joke about, for her incumbent, don't cry on national television. But the markets responded extremely badly to when that did happen to Rachel Reeves. And I think the fact that the strong rumours that the Chancellor is going to be Shabana Mahmood and that the markets have rallied, the pound has risen and our borrowing costs have gone down is a really good sign that, aside from the fact that she is just a very good minister, the markets, who everyone was terrified would respond badly to the wrong kind of pick, obviously are going with her so far. Very encouraging.
So it turns out Andy is in hock to the bond markets when it comes to his Chancellor pick. Who knew?
Yes, not so good. One of the things I have been thinking about, though, is you said a while ago that the reason that you predicted, actually, that she would be a very, very good Chancellor. She's the kind of pick that you would go for because you want someone clever well regarded and tough enough. And another person who has said in the past, hell yes, I'm tough enough, is Ed Miliband. And I was thinking about if I were running one of the attack teams at Conservative headquarters or Lib Dems or Reform or wherever, the reason Shabana Mahmood is such a good appointment is she's really hard to get purchase on because she's done a great job as Home Secretary. But Ed Miliband has got a well-documented series of quotes you can use about him, or at least lines you can use. So he was known as Red Ed during the 2015 general election. We've all seen the picture of him eating that bacon sandwich, which, all he was doing was eating, but it didn't look and feel competent. It was amazing how much traction it got at the time. And also, the public, by and large, are moving away from a lot of the net zero agenda that he's most passionate about.
So all these crises have the same ultimate cause, our dependence on fossil fuels. And all of them have the same solution: low cost, homegrown, zero carbon power for our country.
We talked on Tuesday about how he was allegedly willing to kind of put all that to one side in order to become Chancellor. I don't think that's great either from a sort of principles point of view. But Shabana Mahmood is a curious character because she's had such a strong record at the Home Office. She's very difficult to sort of land a punch on, and you can bet your bottom dollar that for every other cabinet appointment, obviously including the Prime Minister, these teams will be working on sort of dirty dossiers on all of them. What is the best way to undermine them, attack them? Because both writ large in the media and in election cycles and in the House of Commons, when you have the different debates, you want to try and land the best possible punches. And I think one of the advantages of having Shabana Mahmood in the Treasury is that Pat McFadden comment that, do you remember I said would go on every leaflet? It was a text that he'd sent to Peter Mandelson saying, all my meetings with Labour MPs are people telling me to tax people more in order to spend more on those on welfare. And it's going to be very hard to make that case with her.
And I'd expect, by the way, talking of welfare, that Pat McFadden's to stay in his job, actually, and that the combination of Pat McFadden staying at the helm of DWP, which has got two massive political things for Andy Burnham. Firstly, being able to cut the welfare budget, which they're going to have to do. He's made all the signals about doing, but we already know that that's really tough with Labour MPs. So finding a way to navigate through that is difficult. And you sort of need somebody with Pat McFadden's credibility, acumen and kind of calmness to see that through. And he'll be a great partnership with Shabana Mahmood. And then the second thing is this really genuinely massive problem of NEETs, so of young people. Alan Milburn did this big report earlier in the year about what do we do about the fact that vast numbers of young people are not in education or training, and they apart from for the future of our country. We talked the other day about how it would be great if Andy Burnham's decision making was located around people under 30, not people over 60. That actually this is another kind of problem of our age that, again, a combination of Pat McFadden and Shabana Mahmood might well be able to fix. The other thing I'd say about Shabana Mahmood, which I admire, is I think she's quite lucky and she's good at politics. So if you think about, she was the Justice Secretary when she came in. She wasn't the Justice Secretary when there was all that stuff about jury trials and all of those, the reform and the abolition of jury trials. That work must have started while she was Justice Secretary, but she wasn't at the scene of the crime for the fallback of that. And at the Home Office, all sorts of work was done, obviously pre-election and actually after the election with Yvette Cooper on how do you reduce migration. And she inherited a lot of that and then absolutely put her foot to the floor. So she's been able to, in two quite big and complicated jobs, both not get the blame and get the credit. And I obviously think 10 out of 10 for that. Let's hope she's able to bring that to being Chancellor as well. Although I'm slightly nervous that you started going back and quoting what I've said before. So this could be a terrible episode in 2 years' time when we're like, oh, Shabana, it's going to be so great. And our economy is in the tank. But no, let's not manifest that, Cleo.
There have been a lot of questions about why Andy Burnham is not doing a big reveal of who his cabinet picks are today. Can you just tell the uninformed why that is?
Two things, actually. One, it's really brilliant exercise and playing of power. So one thing I think we can say for the Burnham team is they have definitely got this, that actually, why would you be doing anything other right now than keeping everybody hanging on a pretty short string, so that they are amazingly grateful when they find out that they've got the job. And if they haven't got the job, actually at that point, it's too late. You're hitting the ground running, you're going. And all those people who've been disappointed are starting to think, well, hold on, I need to be ready for what if and what next. So it's very good politics and power play. Well done. It's also, more importantly, constitutionally appropriate that the person who has to be consulted before any Minister of the Crown is appointed is, surprise, surprise, the Crown. So there will be a proper process on Monday whereby the first person who approves the appointments. Now, of course, this is a constitutional nicety. It's not that the King now or the Queen before him was sitting there thinking, are you really sure that's the right person for the security minister job? But it is a constitutional propriety that has to happen. And these are ministers of the Crown and appointments that are made by our monarch. There you go, Cleo.
The cockles of my heart.
I should have stood up for that. I should have stood up, I feel.
I know, I should have had my hand over my heart. There's one just last little thing. Well, it's not little because it's incredibly important, but people obsess over who the cabinet appointments are going to be. And I just wanted to briefly discuss the number 10 team, because some of that has been revealed. Obviously, James Purnell's going to be his chief of staff. And then there's a slew of other very impressive people who'll be taking on different roles. But I've just got a couple of thoughts where you have things like a director of communications, a director of news, and a director of strategic communications. Potential confusion there. There's a director of political strategy. There's a political director, and I'm intrigued by this, not because I think there necessarily will be problems, but you end up having a lot of overlap. What does long term and short term really mean if you've only got 2 years or 3 years max to a general election? And so long as everyone is really communicating well with each other, there'll be no problems. But otherwise, there can be a bit of a bum fight. Everyone says, well, I'm a director of whatever, I should be in the morning meeting. And unless, particularly once you get into that building when you're all shuttled away into funny different rooms, because, it is a couple of townhouses knocked together. It's not a modern working environment. There can be friction.
You're absolutely right. And you and I have both been guilty of the crime of inflating job titles to make somebody who's otherwise a bit sad happy. There's always a bit of job title chicanery. What really matters, to your point, is it's very clear who is making a decision. And if you're a poor, beleaguered civil servant in this environment, which of these political masters actually matters? So to the decision that you've got to put to them, because that's the bit that gets really confusing. And I am an absolute, it makes my skin itch, those email chains with 400 people copied into it. So there is a really, really bad habit that's endemic in Whitehall and has got worse as you get more and more people, is this kind of endless copying and not enough hard accountability. You kind of need to know who's the guy that's going to sign off whether we can say this or that. That's it. That's all I really need to understand. And who's the person to invite to this meeting? And while I really love the short-term, long-term distinction, as in it will be rather a good thing if there were people who worked in number 10 who were thinking beyond this afternoon, very good. Where's that timeline go? So if is short-term today and next week, and is it this year? Is long-term 10 years? How do you decide who to come? Do you have to have the short-term person and the long-term person in the same meeting on energy policy? How do you decide practically who's doing what? So I think some of this can be beautiful on paper, but needs to be really hardwired in practice and personality with who is actually in charge.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, one of the things I have great sympathy with is that I've seen suggestions of factions so far within the projected number 10 Burnham team. And I think, but before I started working in government, I'd have thought, oh gosh, how awful, they're all at loggerheads. And now I just know that often isn't true. So the constant line in the media when I worked for Boris Johnson was that there was a big rivalry between the Vote Leave faction and the former mayoralty office faction. And it just wasn't true. We got on really well and there was no fighting like that. But there was someone or a few people clearly trying to cause mischief. And it's so unhelpful, so undermining. and they've got to put a stop to it immediately.
It's also really interesting that there is very, very little briefing coming out of the Burnham camp at all. I think it shows a really healthy amount of discipline / fear, that actually you're not seeing a great deal of speculation. Now, whether that'll hold through next week, it's really interesting, but you're already hearing quite a lot of the journalists that we now know saying the really annoying thing is you can't get anyone to talk to you. And actually, if you are that disciplined, and if right at the top you can't get anyone to talk to you, then it's very difficult to start genuinely credible stories running about what's going on. So that too is a sign of strength. So we're sat here today on Friday talking about transitions of power, and everyone's focused on Monday when Andy Burnham will become Prime Minister. The actual transition of power obviously happened weeks and weeks, if not months ago, in terms of who were people who wanted to be near the guy who was going to be in charge. Who were they talking to? And that hasn't been Keir Starmer for some time now. There was obviously a period of time where it might not have been Andy Burnham, it could have been Wes Streeting, it might have been Angela Rayner. There were other kind of centres of power in the Labour galaxy, but right now it's been Andy Burnham, and then it's been James Pennell, and then it's been the people that everyone knows are their people for some weeks now. So power shifts a long time before actually even the Prime Minister notices, I think.
Can I trouble you to walk us through what that sort of transfer window, bit of footy knowledge there, how that actually goes? What's going to happen to Andy Burnham on Monday, and what's going to happen to Keir Starmer?
Well, we interviewed Peter Hill, who was Principal Private Secretary for Theresa May and Boris Johnson for our summer series of podcasts about lessons from Number 10. And one of the things I hadn't realised was that we've talked a lot before about how if you're a civil servant in Number 10, you have this really weird day on the day that the Prime Minister's change over where you're saying goodbye and it's very emotional and you're saying goodbye to your old boss. And then you've got this amazing kind of pivot on your heels to get ready to welcome in all these super excited people who are coming to work in Number 10 for the first time, and then a new Prime Minister and a new top team, and you're kind of go, go, go. I had forgotten until we heard Peter telling us the story that if you're the Principal Private Secretary, so that is effectively the most senior civil servant who works for the Prime Minister and is at their side in everything, that the Principal Private Secretary goes in the car to Buckingham Palace with the outgoing Prime Minister, gets out of the car, and then has to kind of scurry round to be ready to get in the car with the new Prime Minister coming back to Downing Street. So hats off to all those Principal Private Secretaries who've done that. Not easy.
Yeah, it's a weird split to the day, isn't it? That on the one hand, it's tearful and goodbye and thanks for everything, and then it almost immediate, hello, welcome. It's quite manipulative. So what about the other civil servants? So the Principal Private Secretary goes off and might be away for maybe an hour, do you think, at Buckingham Palace? And then
at most, yeah.
Great fanfare, helicopters following the car on the way back to Number 10. In the meantime, the special advisors have all been hustled out if they're on the way out, and they've come onto the street if they're on the way in. What happens to the Prime Minister, the new Prime Minister, and the civil servants?
So the new Prime Minister stands on the steps of Downing Street, traditionally, makes their speech. The speech really matters because that's not just what they say for the telly on the day. It ought to be their marching instructions for the whole of the public sector and their kind of opportunity to really set parameters. And
particularly for Andy Burnham, would you say, because he has not come in on the Labour manifesto?
Definitely. He sort of has to set out his personal manifesto. He did that for Makerfield. The United Kingdom is not Makerfield. So what is he going to say on Monday morning, which is going to set the kind of pattern for him as Prime Minister, tell us a bit more about who he is, and give us a bit of what does a Burnham Prime Ministership really look like. And I hope we'll see a lot of that. And then he turns on his heels, walks through the door, all the clapping people, like political team and civil servants, welcome him in to the building, straight down the corridor. Hello. No time for like massive amounts of chatting, no time for everything else. And you can sometimes see the political team almost get whiplash because what's happened then is, the civil service side, thanks very much, you're our guy now, you're the Prime Minister. So you sort of have to come into our world and here we go. And it's starting off with cabinet appointments. And we've speculated about the people, but the actual organisational effort that has to go into those appointments is pretty extraordinary. And it's exhausting because you have this huge operation within Downing Street of, do you remember the old rolling chain, the rolling email chain?
Yeah. And headset.
Oh, yes. It's a military-esque sort of precision operation where you have everybody timed to perfection of the point at which they're supposed to arrive at Downing Street, how they're getting to Downing Street, walking up the street, coming in, having the conversation with the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has to be ready to give them their instructions. It's a very powerful moment, as I think we've talked about before. It's this really intense moment where a new minister will think, OK, this is what the boss wants from me. This is how I'm going to do my job well. And then they get off and they have their horrible conversation about their own propriety and their ethics and whether there are things about them. This is the sort of last chance saloon for telling the government that actually it might not be the best idea to appoint them because there might be some skeletons in some closets or some issues that need to be managed. And then when you've got the blessing from the propriety and ethics check, the appointment's been made, then in a way it's like children leaving the nest. Then the minister's gone, they're off and they're into their department. And that's again when you quite often see the political team in Number 10 thinking, hang on a second, we've been having all of these conversations with this person who's been part of our team, and then they've abandoned us, they've gone, and there they go off into their department to do their thing. And you do that on rinse and repeat. I think on the day that Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, I think we went through the appointments of more ministers in a day than had ever been done before. We did the whole of the cabinet and we did most of the ministers of state and even got into some of the junior ranks, and we kind of called it a day at some ridiculous time of night, because that's part of one of the things that you want to do is really project that you're in office, in power and governing right from the off.
And he has to do quite a lot of firing as well, doesn't he? Because there are people who are going to lose their jobs.
Yes, and there's a choice to be made there, right? I mean, with all of these conversations, there's a choice to be made. What is it that the Prime Minister does? What is it that his Chief of Staff does? What is it the Chief Whip does? Who is the person who has those conversations to land the messages? What happened when Boris Johnson had to effectively start by sacking Theresa May's cabinet, because obviously people have jobs until they don't have jobs. There's not like a hiatus. The Home Secretary will be the Home Secretary. Quite important that the Defence Secretary is the Defence Secretary until you ask someone to stand aside and then that somebody else is going to be appointed. I remember one of the things at the end of Boris Johnson's first day when we were kind of looking back at what had happened and doing a bit of a wash up, him saying that the conversations he'd enjoyed the most were the ones with the people that he'd fired because they were so gracious and lovely about it. And actually, the gracious and lovely people were the people from Theresa May's cabinet who were stepping aside, and the slightly less gracious people were the people that he'd appointed to jobs, which I think boded for the future.
What do you think, just having just been around for some of these, both for normal reshuffles and transfers of power, what do you think the sort of cardinal sin or big mistake can be?
It's a moment when it's the kind of professional civil service really comes into its own, because you definitely have to do a sort of King is dead, long live the King moment. And both your new ministerial boss and their political advisors are hawkish about you looking like you still feel like you're working for the last person. So you have to be so disciplined with yourself of not talking about it's like an ex-partner, right? It's like no one wants to hear how great a boyfriend the last guy was. No one's interested in that. So you have to be super sensitive about not doing that, and not assuming the pattern that the new minister will fall into the pattern of the old one. So you really go out of your way when you're forming those early relationships to be very sensitive to don't give them the tea the way the old person liked the tea, or it's all of that dynamic stuff. Like, make sure you're asking them questions about what they like, really learn their preferences really early on, and then you make sure that they never see again the thing that they didn't like. And you have to almost really overdo the signalling that this is your place and your whatever. And I have seen civil servants really get that wrong, either insufficient cleaning out of the old guy's stuff, or telling new ministers sometimes, I did actually once see somebody do this, that it was much better because what the other guy used to do. You're thinking, no, this is a disaster. Please don't say It doesn't matter. Whatever this person thinks is now what we all think.
I have been given a list of questions for you, and I just need to do a bit of an explanation here because each question has a song title by the band The Smiths attached to it, which I believe is something to do with Andy Burnham, but I'm not totally sure. And these song titles are written in italics, and I thought Vicar in a tutu was just a weird expression. I didn't realise it was a song. So bear with me. So on day one, heaven knows I'm miserable now. When does the Prime Minister have the really scary initial security conversations? And does he get nuclear codes?
So he will have started some of those scary conversations and they will continue. That's part of Prime Minister's life. He does not get the nuclear codes. That's not really how it works. The very hard thing that he does have to do, all Prime Ministers have to do, is decide what instructions to give our nuclear submarine commanders on what to do if they cannot make contact with the UK after a nuclear attack. So every Prime Minister writes letters that are sealed and sent and put into a safe on a nuclear submarine, and the commander of the nuclear submarine would open those, and it basically says whether to attack in revenge or not. And none of us know and will ever know what are in those letters.
Well, that leads us nicely on to panic on the streets of Whitehall. When does Andy Burnham really start to realise he's Prime Minister, he's in charge, there's only scary things to come?
I suspect his first day will involve some difficult decisions because not everybody will be happy with their appointments. And he's going to have some unhappy people as well as some happy people. And in my experience, there's a point when suddenly they realise they are the person. And that's it now.
Okay, back to the old house. What do ex-Prime Ministers do after they leave number 10? Where do they live? Do they just retreat to lick their wounds? Do they pick a weird hobby?
Oh, I don't know about former Prime Minister's hobbies, actually. That's a good question. They do tend to have to go and live somewhere else for a while, so in an indeterminate location, because they have quite often left office in a hurry, so haven't got a plan. There's probably somebody living in their house. So usually some generous benefactor or friend will let them go and live in their house for a bit while they work out what the hell they're going to do with the rest of their life.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Please, please, please let me get what I want. Oh, yeah, I know that one. Yay.
Maybe we should be singing them at you.
How soon will lobbyists, colleagues, former colleagues start badgering the new PM for things they want?
Oh, weeks ago. So that's already happened. And I sincerely hope he has taken the advice to change his phone number.
Vicar in a tutu. Is there a dress rehearsal for when the new Prime Minister arrives?
No.
I guess we've had so many recently.
So many. So it's funny, in 2015, we did have to remind ourselves of all sorts of things because it had been a while since we'd had a new Prime Minister from the civil service side. I don't think that's the case these days, so I'm afraid the files are not even dusty. Cleo doesn't know any of these Smith songs. The joke isn't funny anymore. Cleo, tell us about PMs moving into their new homes and if you know anything about what they might think about the previous inhabitants.
Yeah. Well, if you recall, when Boris Johnson and Carrie Johnson moved into the flat that Theresa and Philip May previously lived in, they called it a John Lewis nightmare. And then they did some quite expensive decorations. Then when Jeremy Hunt went in, because he went into their flat, he talked about gold wallpaper. So there was some interior design choices not everybody agreed with, put it that way.
Also, John Lewis Nightmare, I didn't agree with.
I know, there's no such thing.
Sounds lovely. Fancy.
I know.
So Monday, Burnham's first day at big school. What's your advice?
Oh, gosh. I mean, he must know the building a bit already just because he worked in the Blair and Brown years. But it's a whole different thing when you're in charge. You've got to know where the loos are, obviously. And the urinal that was there back in...
Oh, yeah.
It's gone. It's gone, baby.
Don't pee in the waiting room.
No,
don't pee in the waiting
they won't
room.
like
That's
that
good
at
advice.
So that's gone. You've got to go around the corner now. And I must say, get down to the cafeteria and befriend the ladies who work there. They're so nice. And at the end of the day, they quite often give you discounted things that won't last overnight. I once ate 13 sausages in a day. Insatiable.
Do you think the Prime Minister will be down there in getting the discount sausages at the end of the working day? Maybe he will.
Well, we've got to pinch the pennies where we can.
My advice is also going to be to do with food, but perhaps not 13 sausages levels of food, which is very easy on these really big days to forget about your hydration and your eating, and you get very nervous, and then you realise it's got to 9 o'clock and you haven't eaten anything. So being Prime Minister is a marathon, not a sprint. So look after yourself, actually.
Yeah, and make tea properly.
Oh my, don't get me started on that. I can't bear it.
Tell the people what the future Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland said.
He said that when making a cup of tea, he puts milk in the cup with the tea bag in order to moisten the bag, were the words that he used. He did acknowledge himself that would cause some controversy, and he's right about that. It's barbaric
and he's not
practice.
afraid. He's not afraid of controversy. I like that.
I mean, more so than I thought, to be honest. I thought he was a people pleaser. That is the least people pleasing thing I've ever heard.
More on this as it comes.
Thank you for listening to this episode of In the Room. Remember to follow us on a podcast player of choice and leave us a 5-star review if you enjoy it.
And do email us your feedback and questions. We really enjoy reading them and we will keep replying. We are in the room at independent.co.uk. If you're listening on Spotify, you can comment under each episode with your thoughts, and you can keep up to date with the best bits of the pod on Instagram at intheroom.pod.
This podcast is part of the Independent Podcast Network and produced in association with Next Chapter Studios.
The executive producer is Rod Ardehali and the producer is Sam Durham.
A special mention to our content editor, Maya Anushka, and our video editor, Vali Raza.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on Tuesday when we'll finally be able to see what Andy Burnham's real cabinet picks are.